We open to a view of a spacecraft approaching Mars in the year 2032. That had put it 6 years into World War III back on Earth, but that hasn't stopped baseball games, and the guy in the craft updates people on the surface about scores. A bit of shaking shuts him up as something is approaching. A view through the window shows the something looks not unlike a giant space lemon, and it's coming right at him. Let's jump forward about 350 years and join Chakotay. He's having some downtime, or would be if the ship didn't keep preventing it. A misfiring door chime and bugged comm system make him give up and find out what's going on. Once he manages to get out of his quarters, anyway. The culprit is Seven, who's decided to upgrade the main computer core. That's had an unexpected knock-on effect for minor systems, but the shaking that interrupts their conversation is not caused by her. To the bridge, where we discover a Janeway displeased by being woken at 2 a.m. To be fair to Kim, he's probably made the right call, as we're being chased by a Wibbly. The Wibbly transforms into the Space Lemon. Janeway says it's 30 million terajoules of subspace energy, perhaps to try and distract the viewer from the fact that it looks like a fucking lemon. The bad news is that it's a heat-seeking lemon, and it's locked onto us. The good news is that Seven's familiar with space lemons, the Borg having previously encountered them. She says if we shut everything down it'll stop, and we should do a polarity thingy too, because this is science fiction, and that's what you do in science fiction. It works, and the lemon overtakes us, as Janeway says she knows what it is too. Space lemons have been reported by Starfleet previously. She says they pop up from subspace randomly and dive back in, so I guess I'm renaming it to the Subspace Lemon. It's Chakotay who makes the connection with the ship from the opening scene of the show, despite Paris being the resident nerd about that time period. In fact, we had an episode in the last season where he specifically said he was an expert on Mars missions from 1970 onward. Odd that we choose Chakotay for the role instead, but let's see where we're going with this. Anywho, he thinks we should try and follow while sticking a probe in it. Nobody else has ever managed to get a proper look at Subspace Lemons, so we might as well be the first. Down in astrometrics, we're taking a look at the probe's readings. The centre of the lemon is pretty stable, despite the outside being rather violent. Seven gives ideas for how to destroy it, a plan that the Borg were developing, but Tuvok agrees with Chakotay that we should study it. As if to prove him right, the probe finds some materials consistent with things found in the Alpha Quadrant, and specifically some stuff used in early Earth spaceships. You know, like the one that disappeared around Mars. That's enough for everybody to assume that this is definitely debris from the missing Mars ship, so after a little background briefing, we have a chat about how we can pop inside the Subspace Lemon and take a look for ourselves. Janeway's hoping to find the ship itself, which seems a touch optimistic. Even if the core is calmer than the outside, everything else it's sucked up over the years would have turned the thing into a giant rock tumbler. Still, perhaps they've got reason to be optimistic, based on how many things from Earth we've found over the last 5 years. We might not be following the Borg plan to destroy it that Seven mentioned, but we can nick their idea on shield modifications to get inside. Not that she sees the point. Seven hangs back at the end to question why any of this is necessary. The risk-reward ratio seems heavily weighted on the former as far as she can tell. Janeway tries to explain the difference between exploration and simply gathering data, but thinks experience might be a better teacher. That's why she's decided that Seven should volunteer to go on the mission. Seven catches up with Paris and Chakotay in astrometrics, where they're watching the communication archive from the Mars mission, specifically the end of it. Seven still thinks all of this is horseshit, and seeing Paris and Chakotay gush over one of their heroes doesn't help convince her otherwise. Still, she's decided that she's going anyway. Either it'll be an eye-opener, or she'll be able to tell Janeway that she was wrong. That's a win-win. Travel on the outside of the Subspace Lemon is quite rough, but once they punch through the peel, things smooth out a little. Voyager loses sensor readings of the Delta Flyer, but not contact, so the remaining bridge crew are treated to Chakotay and Paris describing the interior of the Lemon. After a little prompting from Janeway, even Seven admits that the contents are interesting, with some bits possibly being from other dimensions. All that shite flying around is causing issues with tracking down the Mars ship, so they'll have to do it the hard way. Still, they've got 5.5 hours before Tuvok's calculations suggest it'll dive back into subspace. That's assuming the minor course change we just mentioned out of the blue doesn't affect anything. Having to search the hard way isn't all bad news. They've been able to hoover up all sorts of interesting things in the process, and give Seven a little conversation on the topic of personal desires, too. They're pulled back to the cockpit by Paris, who's found the ship they're looking for. It's in a lot better shape than it has any right to be based on the speed of the stuff rattling around in here, but I guess there wouldn't be much of a show if it was just paste by now. To be fair to the script, both Paris and Chakotay acknowledge that this is bollocks. It's also a pain in the arse, as it means they can't just stick whatever they find in the back of the Delta Flyer like they planned. Looks like we'll have to tow it out. That's assuming they get the chance. That course change we mentioned for no reason a while back, there have been others, and Janeway thinks that's because something's pulling it in, like Voyager did when it was running at full power. The thing in question is an asteroid made of dark matter, and that Subspace Lemon is going to eat it in about 4 minutes. We also don't know what that'll do to the Subspace Lemon, as dark matter follows the teachings of the Sith, so any impact could cause a major disturbance in the Force. Janeway calls Chakotay to tell him they need to exit the Subspace Lemon right now. He hears her order, then chooses to ignore it, and tells Paris to do tractor things to the Mars ship. Seven thinks this is bullshit, and even Paris has to be told twice more before he follows Chakotay's order. They've only a minute to escape, and that ship's slowing them down, but Chakotay still thinks they can manage it. The universe disagrees, and the impact of the dark matter asteroid sends shockwaves through the Lemon. The Delta Flyer is thrown back, and Chakotay's console does an Emperor Palpatine to him, then throws him to the floor. Serves him right. Bellend. The impact has done a number on Chakotay, giving him a concussion and internal injuries. It's done pretty much the same to the Delta Flyer as well. Loads of systems are offline, but the major problem is the engines. Other stuff can be repaired, but those are completely fucked. Oh, and we've got 2 hours before the Subspace Lemon returns to its namesake. Chakotay wakes, eventually, and his immediate concern is the Mars ship. Paris tells him everything's bollocksed, and he doesn't sound too chuffed with Chakotay either. Some shaking happens and Paris goes to the cockpit to have a fiddle, or possibly just to get away from Chakotay. That leaves him alone with Seven, meaning she gets the chance to tear him a new arsehole when he tries to pull rank. The verbal pummeling about his failures ends just as Voyager finds a way to call them. Now we're back in contact, it's time to work on a plan. Sending another shuttle's out, and so is grabbing them with a tractor beam. Those irreparable engines would be repairable if we had a working replicator, as they only need a relatively minor replacement part. Happily, it's a part that hasn't changed much in about, 350 years. In fact, B'Elanna thinks you could probably jury-rig one from a part that did roughly the same job all those centuries ago. In a ship for an early Mars mission, for example. Looks like someone's going for an away mission inside the away mission. Getting over there isn't a problem at least, as the teleporter is still working. Paris offers to go and grab the part, but is told by Janeway that he needs to stay at the helm in case there are more shaky things. Exactly what use that'll be when the engines don't fucking work is never explained, but let's ignore that for now. This means the volunteer will be Seven, as Chakotay is injured. If we ever get back to Earth, Seven is going to be left with a very skewed idea of what the term volunteer means. Paris uses thrusters to get us into teleporter range, so I guess there is something he can do at the helm. Oh, wait, he said it's dead now. Still, Seven's already in a suit, so she may as well be the one to go, eh? Chakotay asks her to try and download the database while she's over there, and maybe have a little poke around, too. She gives an incredible display of restraint by resisting the urge to kick his balls right off his body. It looks pretty good inside for a 350-year-old wreck. Even the pilot is still in one piece. And the computer still works too, after sticking a flashy gizmo on it anyway. A log starts playing when it reboots, and at Chakotay's request, she broadcasts it to them while she works. The logs form a diary of what happened to the pilot once the ship was eaten by the Subspace Lemon. He documents his discoveries, including another spacecraft, as his ship slowly loses power. An attempt by him to escape the Lemon fails, though he'd still have been fucked either way given the sublight propulsion system he had on hand. At the end, he chooses to disable life support so that the remaining power can be used to keep running the primitive imaging systems. His last request is that, if anybody finds this, they should take the data that he's gathered and make use of it. All of which is heard by Seven. She's managed to retrieve the part, but also takes the time to download the ship's database. If it were just Chakotay asking, I think she'd have fucked it off, but things have changed. There is one other thing she decides to bring back too, placing her comm badge on the pilot's corpse and asking Paris to teleport her and it back to the Delta Flyer. We have the part, and after some science, and then some more science when the first science doesn't work, we manage to get the ship running again. Well, mostly. And just in time, too, the Subspace Lemon is off home again, so we'd best escape sharpish. Some bits of the Delta Flyer do a kaboom, and Voyager has to get close and pull them out with a tractor beam, but it all works out in the end. Time for a funeral. We're holding it on the bridge, which is more than we did for the Marquis funeral in Season 2, by the way. Theirs was held in the mess hall, and the poor bastard wasn't even treated to dress uniform. Still, this guy had a speaking part, so that's probably why he gets the full service. Even Seven speaks up, her opinion of history and exploration having been altered somewhat by recent events. The metal suppository is farted out by Voyager, and we add yet another piece of space trash to the Delta Quadrant before we fly away. It was at 4:57 when I started to suspect this episode was not going to be an award winner. Having this many names credited to the writing is generally not a good sign. Mention shortly after of reversing polarity, that evergreen bullshit sci-fi term, did little to reassure me. Impressive then that it still manages to not be a stinker despite some missteps. I was right when I thought that it won't be a highlight, but it's not a low point either, and sometimes that's enough. There are issues with it, of course. The whole point of being in the Delta Quadrant is that things are supposed to be new. I've lost count now of the times we've accidentally bumped into something recognisably from the Alpha Quadrant, and the number of those to have originated from our own solar system is, to be generous, statistically questionable. I take issue with Chakotay being shoehorned into the role of Mars expert too, despite nothing during a previous high-profile discussion on the same topic in the episode 1159. The reason is because the story needs someone who can't be overruled to make a terrible decision, and the tenuousness of that plot point is as obvious as it is unnecessary. See, we already know that Chakotay had an interest in archaeology mentioned all the way back in Season 3. That alone would have made it plausible for him to volunteer as leader of the mission and want to retrieve the debris despite the risk. Chakotay is certainly a character that needs more substance to him, but tacking on a new trait purely to cover a plot hole that didn't exist in the first place doesn't help anybody. We do better on that topic a little later. As Seven and Chakotay are discussing a fossil on the Delta Flyer, Chakotay talks a little about being essentially a passenger in his own life. Putting aside his own desires to follow what he felt was his duty is something we've touched upon before, the adopting of his father's faith after his death despite, or perhaps because, of their difficult relationship. It's the sort of thing we've needed more of for ages now, a look at the drive behind what is often presented to us as a caricature. I've read that this is one of the episodes over which Beltran was, shall we say, outspoken. According to him, he was told this was supposed to be a Chakotay episode, only to have it switched to being about Seven. Episodes exploring her have been more common over the last 2 seasons than episodes for Chakotay over all 6. Loath as I am to agree with a man who's proven himself to be a bit of a cock, he's right that a greater focus on Chakotay in this one would probably have made for a more interesting story. Of course, that doesn't necessarily equate to better ratings. As I've said previously, what each of us want and what will make a successful show are not always the same thing. Then again, the last 2 stories to prominently feature Chakotay have been complete and utter wank, so maybe it's better this way. What we're left with is certainly serviceable enough, even if it's not likely to be one we remember. End of episode.
Look, can we just agree now that we're not going to use them again?
Them?
You know, the ones who keep doing the smoke thing.
You mean the
Don't say it.
Don't say what?
Leprechauns. Oh. Yeah, I suppose that one's on me. Woof.